Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Glad you're here, ready for today's topic, the one you all requested.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to walk away from toxic situations?
Yeah.
And, we're not just limiting this to romantic relationships, right?
Right.
Friendships,
Absolutely.
jobs, anything really
Everything,
that's
yeah.
causing harm, but you can't seem to leave.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Why do we cling to what's hurting us?
Well, to help us get to the bottom of that, we're digging into some really fascinating articles from, have you heard of Stoic.nu?
I have, yeah.
They kind of dive deep into these critical social issues. And, they use some pretty interesting AI tools to explore the why behind these questions.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what they have to say.
So one of the first things that really jumped out at me was just how much our brains crave familiarity. One article even said that, like, a toxic environment can actually feel safer than the unknown. Is that because our brains are trying to, like, conserve energy?
You're exactly right. Our brains are wired for efficiency, predictability, even when it's negative. Well, it demands less mental energy than facing the unknown. Think of it like, you're walking down a familiar path.
Okay.
Versus venturing into an uncharted forest. That familiar path, even if it leads somewhere, undesirable, it feels safer because it's known.
I get that. So even if that familiar path that we're talking about, it's leading us towards something harmful, our brain might still prefer it just because it's predictable.
Yeah. And this is where the idea of cognitive dissonance comes into play. I'm sure you've encountered this at some point. A job is making you miserable, but the thought of starting over, absolutely terrifying.
You just think you're stuck. So is that cognitive dissonance?
That's exactly it. That mental discomfort we get when we're, holding two conflicting beliefs. Like, on one hand, okay, we know something's bad for us. On the other, we just can't seem to leave. And our brain, remember, it loves sufficiency. It tries to resolve this. How? By justifying a situation, we convince ourselves it's not that bad.
Right.
It'll get better, or I'm just scared of change. These justifications, well, even if they're untrue, they let us stay put. They lessen that dissonance. It's like our brain's tricking us into staying.
Wow. That's so interesting. Have you ever felt that pull yourself, that, like, choosing known pain over unknown pain?
Oh, it's a very common human experience. And it's related to another powerful force at work, dopamine.
Oh, yeah, dopamine.
The brain's feel-good chemical.
Right.
Yeah.
How does that fit in with all this?
So think about how toxic relationships tend to work. They go in cycles, right?
Yeah.
Arguments, hurt, then a little reconciliation, fleeting kindness, maybe a big apology. Well, during those moments, your brain is flooded with dopamine. It creates this intense feeling of relief and pleasure.
Okay, so it's kind of like those slot machines, the ones that give you a little win every now and then.
Yes.
Just to keep you playing even though you're losing in the long run.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. And the problem is that those boosts of dopamine, they become, addictive. We crave them. We crave those highs, even when those lows become increasingly damaging.
So even though the person's hurting us, our brain might be chasing those dopamine hits.
Exactly. And because, the person knows how to push our buttons, they can manipulate that cycle, keep us hooked on those intermittent rewards.
But it's not just the dopamine, right? This article, it also said that fear plays a big part in keeping us in these toxic places. It even compared leaving a toxic relationship to quitting heroin.
That's a powerful comparison, and it highlights just how intense that fear can be. It all comes down to the amygdala, the part of our brain that processes fear. See, the amygdala, it's always scanning for threats. And when it senses uncertainty, it triggers a fear response. Leaving a toxic situation is full of unknowns. What will my life be like?
Right, yeah.
Will I be alone?
Can I even handle it?
Exactly.
It's scary.
And those questions, they activate the amygdala, and suddenly the unknown, even if it could be good, it feels like a threat.
So that's why leaving feels so terrifying, even when we know, logically, it's the best thing for us. Our brains are just hardwired to keep us safe, even if that means staying somewhere harmful.
It's important to remember that those feelings are natural. Our brains are wired this way. It helped us survive. But understanding those responses, that can be the first step to breaking free.
Okay, so we've got our brain's need for what's familiar, the dopamine trap, and the fear of the unknown,
right,
all working to keep us in toxic situations. But this article, It goes even deeper, right?
It does.
It's not just our brain chemistry.
It talks about the human need to have something to hold on to. It says, and this is powerful, you can't truly let go of the old until you have something new to reach for.
I see what you mean. It's like someone staying in a dead-end job just because they haven't figured out what comes next.
Exactly. That unknown can be paralyzing, especially if you've been in a toxic environment for a while. And then there's the emotional dependency factor. You know, the article talked about how toxic people often chip away at our self-worth, making us feel like we don't have other options.
It's so sad. And then there's that fear of being alone, that what if no one else loves me kind of thinking.
Right. It's primal, you know, our need for connection. And it's important to remember those fears. While they're valid, they get amplified in a toxic environment. The person might even exploit those fears, you know, to keep control, make you feel isolated, like you have nowhere else to turn.
And then there's the comfort of routine, even if it's a painful one.
Yeah. Our brains love patterns. They're easy to follow. Change, well, it takes effort, courage. It means stepping outside your comfort zone.
Sounds like there's a lot working against us when we try to leave these situations, both internally and externally.
You're right. It's a multifaceted challenge.
But the good news is, the article doesn't just leave us hanging, feeling helpless, right?
Yeah.
It gives us some steps we can actually take to break free. We'll dive into those in part 2 of this deep dive. Join us then.
Breaking free from a toxic situation, it's a process.
Right. It's not like you just wake up one day and poof, you're free. So where do we even begin?
The article, it emphasizes, you know, acknowledging the reality of the situation.
Yep.
It's about facing the truth, saying, you know, this is harmful. Sometimes putting it in writing, it can really help.
Like actually writing down what's happening.
Yeah, you create a record of the patterns, you know, the hurtful actions, how it's impacting you. It helps move past the denial, the rationalizations that often keep us stuck.
So acknowledge it, get it out of our heads onto paper. What then?
The article talks about envisioning a life without this toxicity, you know? Imagine your life outside of this situation. What would you do? How would you feel? Who would you be surrounded by?
I like that. It's like shifting our focus from what we lose to what we could gain.
Exactly. And hold on to that image. Let it be your North Star, you know, guiding you towards a brighter future.
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
And it sounds like we're going to need that, you know, because it's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the article, it stressed having a support system, right?
A support system is crucial. Talk to trusted friends, family, a therapist. Even just hearing another perspective can help you see things more clearly.
Yeah. It's like having a reality check, especially when those doubts creep in. Maybe it's not that bad, or maybe I'm overreacting.
Exactly. A support system, it's like an anchor. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you of your worth, and they can provide that encouragement, that strength you need to move forward.
So we've acknowledged the reality. We're creating a vision of freedom and building that support system. What about taking action? What does the article suggest for actually making a move?
Small steps. It encourages taking small steps towards change.
Okay.
This could be setting boundaries in the relationship, maybe exploring new interests, spending time with people who, you know, make you feel good.
It's about like reclaiming your power bit by bit.
Exactly. You don't need all the answers right away. You don't have to make drastic changes overnight. Small, consistent steps, they build momentum. They make it feel less overwhelming. And every step is a victory.
Good point. Celebrating those small wins can make a big difference.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing your progress, acknowledging your courage.
The article, it brought up this idea of replacing the old with something new. It used this analogy of a trapeze artist. You know, they only let go of one bar when they have another to grab.
Oh, that's a great analogy. It highlights the importance of having alternatives, something to fill the void, to provide hope, direction.
What kind of alternatives are we talking about?
It could be a new goal, something you've always wanted to do, or just a vision of a healthier relationship with yourself or with others. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to feel more aligned with what you truly value, what you desire.
So a lot of it is about like shifting our mindset, focusing on the positive instead of dwelling on the negative.
You got it. It's retraining your brain to focus on what you want to create instead of what you're trying to escape. And remember, our brains are adaptable. The more we focus on those positive alternatives, the stronger those neural pathways become. And the pull of the toxic situation weakens.
So it means we're not stuck repeating the same patterns. We can actually rewire our brains to make healthier choices.
Exactly. And the article says something really important. The fear of leaving is often far worse than the actual experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in the what ifs and worst case scenarios.
But we're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
It's about trusting yourself, believing that you have the capacity to navigate the challenges that come with change. And you don't have to do it alone.
That's what that support system is for, right?
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about understanding our brain's role, recognizing other factors involved, and really the importance of finding alternatives. The article, it ended on a powerful note, didn't it?
It did. It reminded us that leaving a toxic relationship, a friendship, a job, it's not a sign of weakness.
It actually said staying doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human.
Exactly. We all have moments where we get stuck, where our brains, our emotions keep us in places that don't serve us. It's about recognizing those patterns, understanding why they happen, and then taking steps towards change.
And it said any step, no matter how small, it's a victory. Worth celebrating.
Absolutely. Every step away from a toxic situation is a step towards reclaiming your power, your well-being, your sense of self.
And it concluded with this: you are stronger than the situation you are in, and you deserve more than what hurts you. Freedom is waiting for you, and you are capable of reaching it.
A message of hope and empowerment. It really captures the essence of what we've been talking about. Understanding, self-compassion, believing in our ability to create a better life.
It's so important to talk about this, because it can feel so isolating, so overwhelming when you're stuck in that cycle. Knowing that it's not your fault, that there are steps you can take to break free, it's incredibly empowering.
It's about shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing leaving as a loss, view it as a chance for growth, self-discovery, creating something more fulfilling.
This has been a deep dive indeed. I'm curious, what stands out to you, listener? What resonated most, and what small step can you take today to move towards a healthier, more fulfilling life? We'll explore those questions further in part 3 of this deep dive. See you there. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking why it's so hard to leave those toxic situations, and we've been exploring some ways to break free.
It's been quite a journey, right? But hopefully you're starting to see that freedom, it really is within reach.
Yeah. I feel like we've moved beyond just understanding the problem. We've actually started to give ourselves some tools and strategies to make a change.
Exactly. And that's where the power is, isn't it? It's not just understanding the why, but empowering ourselves with the how.
So where do we go from here? We've talked about taking small steps, finding alternatives, building that support system. But what does actually putting those things into action? What does that look like?
It's about reclaiming your narrative, your agency. You are the author of your own story.
Ooh, I love that. And it goes back to that idea of finding alternatives. What kind of new chapter are you ready to write? Listener, what does a healthier, more fulfilling life, what does that look like for you?
That's the exciting part, right? The possibilities, they're endless. It's about rediscovering yourself, your passions, your values, creating a life that truly reflects who you are and what you want to experience.
It doesn't have to be like a total reinvention of yourself, does it?
Not at all. It could be as simple as reconnecting with things that brought you joy before, or exploring something totally new, something that sparks your curiosity.
It's about nurturing yourself, right? Giving yourself permission to explore, to grow, to evolve.
Yeah.
We've been discussing all these external factors, but ultimately, the most powerful changes, they happen internally, wouldn't you say? It's that shift in mindset, that belief that, we're worthy and that we can actually create something better.
Absolutely. External changes, they're important, but they come from that internal transformation. It's about recognizing you're worthy of love, of respect, of happiness. It's about trusting yourself to make choices that are aligned with those values.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've really gone deep on why it's hard to leave those toxic situations. But we've explored the steps we can actually take to break free, to create a more fulfilling life. What really stands out to me is just how much power we actually have. We're not just victims of our circumstances. We can change them.
It starts with that first step, right? That willingness to acknowledge the reality and believe that something better is out there.
So listener, what is that one thing you're holding on to, that's no longer serving you? What small step, maybe even just today, what small step can you take to move towards something that brings you joy, peace, genuine connection?
Remember, you're not alone in this. There is support. There are people who understand. And you have the strength to create the life you deserve.
And that's it for our deep dive today. Big thanks to StokeyT.nu for those really insightful articles. And to you, listener, for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep believing in the power of change.